Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film 10 Cloverfield Lane. I guess the big question with this movie is how this connects to the original Cloverfield, and it's called a spiritual sequel by J.J. Abrams, and it's not really connected to it at all. It was originally a spec script called Cellar or The Cellar, and then it was called Valencia, and then suddenly 2 months ago it became 10 Cloverfield Lane. Most of the cast didn't even know it was kind of connected to Cloverfield. There's some debate over whether this was just titled that to get people to see a nice little indie thriller, because they would if it's a sequel to Cloverfield with a recognizable name rather than just called The Cellar or Valencia. Either way, it's probably because they thought it would make more money. It's not really connected at all, and maybe it says something about franchise filmmaking, because frankly I don't think I would have necessarily seen this movie if everything that happened with the trailer and the hubbub about it had happened. So maybe in some ways it's a mini victory, because this is actually a really cool small indie thriller that definitely pulls you in and gets you so into it you're just moving from one tense scene to another, just kind of like gripped and so into what's going on in this bunker, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead's attempts to get out of it and try to figure out what exactly is going on, whether they're telling the truth or not. And it's really gripping, and you're really there, you're really into it. I haven't seen a thriller like this in the multiplex in seemingly forever. It's such a fun, thrilling theatrical experience. Certainly I actually think a lot better than the original Cloverfield, with like this tense music and kind of like a Twilight Zone-y kind of Richard Matheson type of vibe to the whole thing that really gets you in, but is also really intriguing. It's probably one of the few thrillers that you keep wanting to pick away at this mystery. It's almost like J.J. Abrams' mystery box done right. Most of the time I feel like when you make a big deal over this mystery that he's trying to build up, whether it's Star Trek Into Darkness or the original Cloverfield or Super 8, I'm usually disappointed by the results and kind of just forget about the movies, and then when people bring them up later I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. And 10 Cloverfield Lane actually benefits quite a bit from that mystery, and the mystery works with the thriller itself. So it's actually kind of the best use of J.J. Abrams' mystery box just when you thought he was kind of done with it. I guess he used it a little for the marketing of Star Wars, but that was more because it was Star Wars and stuff. It also goes to the thing that Bad Robot and Abrams, even though this was not directed by him, I understand that this was produced by him, one of the things he always likes doing with any projects he's directed or produced is calling back to the past, particularly Amblin and Steven Spielberg. Interesting to bring up Amblin, because when you think of Amblin you don't think of Spielberg, you think of things that Spielberg produced, and this is something that Abrams produced. And this almost feels like, in a weird way, kind of like Spielberg's version of The Twilight Zone, but almost like Abrams's version of Spielberg's version of The Twilight Zone. Like, we're going through multiple generations to get this. That sounds like something you get to the third generation of a VHS and you can't really see it because of static and everything's fuzzy, but this film actually does a really great job with it. I was kind of surprised how well it worked within that world. It had all the best things about that style and really drew me in ways that a great mystery thriller should. Michelle, who has just left her boyfriend Ben after a fight over something, we actually don't know what the fight is, but we know they've gotten in a fight and she is packed up and is leaving, and then on her trip going to somewhere, which we also don't actually know where she's going, she gets in a car accident and then wakes up in an underground bunker built by John Goodman, who tells her that the apocalypse has happened and that he has saved her from the apocalypse in his underground bunker place, with Emmett, played by John Gallagher Jr., who helped him construct this bunker and knew when the apocalypse was happening he needed to get into the bunker, and John Goodman thankfully let him in, and they are all stuck down there because it is too contaminated outside because of possibly a nuclear disaster, and they might need to stay down there for 2 years as fallout continues to happen. She, of course, since she didn't witness any of this apocalypse, is very much questioning his motives and isn't really sure he's actually telling the truth, although various evidence shows that he actually is and that something did happen, but she's never quite sure what his motivations are, why he's put her in this bunker, and what exactly kind of person that Howard, played by John Goodman, is, who's trapped her down here to save her from a possible apocalypse scenario. Something that works really well about 10 Cloverfield Lane that didn't actually work in the original Cloverfield is that you're really invested in all these characters. You pretty much only see 3 characters, Howard, Michelle, and Emmett, and you get to know them really well. You care about them. You don't know their entire life story, but what little you do know about them, you're really connected to them as an audience. So when something happens to them, or they have to go through an air duct or do all sorts of things in the bunker, you care. It matters a lot more in a thriller if you actually care about your character characters. That's something that Hitchcock knew, it's something that Spielberg knew, and it's something that this movie knows as well. And even The Twilight Zone also, is that if you care about these characters, you're gonna care if something actually happens to them. When you don't care and they die, it's like the stakes aren't really there. But with this film, the stakes are very much there because you're so invested in these characters. It made me want to get into it. Every time I'd start to question something, there was a new mystery and I was right back in it. I was very much in this film, and with a great score by Bear McCreary, which felt almost like his version of John Williams doing Bernard Herrmann. It was an amazingly great score. This film very much benefits from a lot of things that work in his favor, and this score, it's one of my favorite scores of this year. It gets you more and more into the mystery because as it plays out, it kind of just helps you down the path of the mystery and trying to find things out about Howard and what exactly is going on in this bunker, and is he being truthful. And every time you kind of show evidence that he is being truthful, you think, well, maybe that's a setup, maybe something else is going on. How does this exactly connect to Cloverfield? That is going throughout your mind throughout the whole thing, even though you will eventually find out. I'm not going to mention anything about that. It's so tense as a thriller, but also how it's kind of like a small indie character piece also, but with very little details. You know very little about Emmett. You know just that Michelle wants to be a fashion designer. She's left her boyfriend. You know Howard is a doomsday prepper and he was in the Navy, and that he's led a full life, and he did all this because he knew one day this was going to happen, but you don't exactly know why, which, when you hear doomsday prepper, you immediately think of someone who's crazy, and Howard is crazy, but then you kind of think, well, but he's obviously a smart guy to organize all this stuff, but maybe he's like smart guy crazy or something. And the creepy performance John Goodman plays in this film. Saying John Goodman's good in a movie is like saying the sky's blue. I don't think I've ever seen John Goodman be bad in anything. You don't see this kind of John Goodman as much. It's certainly not what you know him for from either The Big Lebowski or on Roseanne, but it shows how great of a character actor John Goodman is. Everyone knows John Goodman's a great actor, but I almost feel like he is underappreciated because to me he's one of the greatest actors working in movies and TV today. Like every time I see him on screen, I love to watch John Goodman. And this was a different kind of portrayal for him, but the creepiness and also the warmness of him and also the craziness, it's just like he portrays all of that. Even in the way he walks, the way he moves, he's one of the few performers who he gets that when you're laughing at him, but his character isn't doing something funny. He also understands character motivation versus how you are viewing that character. I don't think a lot of actors do that as well as John Goodman. He has such a presence about him, but he also exudes the characters when he's playing them, but also has such a personality in him. One of the very unique character actors. I really love John Goodman. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who is actually the only choice to play Michelle, is actually really good. Not a huge fan of hers, but I liked her in Scott Pilgrim, and I think this is actually a really great performance by her. Her and John Goodman are kind of like the two leads of this film. They're both kind of probably more kind of character actor lead kind of performances, which makes this film feel a lot more like a B Amazing Stories Twilight Zone type of thing. Like if you had movie stars in this, I think this film would have a totally different feel. It feels almost more relatable and smaller, and like these people could almost be forgotten in a strange way. The other guy, Emmett, played by John Gallagher Jr., does the only thing that could be considered a supporting performance. He does kind of get lost between the two leads in a little bit of a way, but I still thought he was really good. He's kind of playing the simpler guy who just decided to stay in his small town and not go to college, and it's kind of a sad, kind of humble performance, but he's playing a small, kind of humble man, so it totally works for the movie. This was originally going to be Damien Chazelle's directorial debut, but then the funding for Whiplash came through and he decided to leave the project. He didn't come up with the story, but he did help write the screenplay. Whiplash felt like a bank heist movie. It felt like a thriller, and it's interesting, like when he actually writes a thriller, how tense and how in it you are, just like in Whiplash. You think a movie about a jazz drummer isn't going to pique your attention as much as it does and make you kind of just so enveloped in the story, and this does that as well. This is directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who I've never really heard of before, but it's his directorial debut, and he does a very good job, especially like this film is all about really acting. It's one of those mystery type films where you can really just fall in love with the concept and the whole idea of it, but the whole reason you really fall in love with the concept and the idea of it is the acting, which this is very interesting in being a follow-up to Cloverfield, because Cloverfield felt like a film that's concept over acting, but wants to act like this concept is really about the acting, but it totally didn't work because they're just like kind of flimsy caricatures of people. You don't really know much about them. You don't understand their personalities. You don't understand why certain people would like other people. And in 10 Cloverfield Lane, that's not something I'm thinking about. I understand why Emmett and Michelle, their relationship and their relationship to Howard, even though certain details are left out. Like, I don't know why she left her boyfriend. I don't know where she was potentially going. I don't know what Emmett's deal is or Howard's deal, but that's not important. And I think the difference in these two films is that in Cloverfield, that was information we actually needed. In 10 Cloverfield Lane, it understands what information we need for the mystery and how that helps the mystery play along. It does feel like an Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It feels so anthology-like. It's interesting that not a lot of anthology franchises are ever successful. I mean, Halloween 3 was an attempt at that, and that was an absolute failure. I guess Tales from the Crypt had more than one movie, but that was about it. There's never really been an anthology film franchise, and that this feels so much like The Twilight Zone or Amazing Stories or The Outer Limits or something that makes sense in a way. It's like you couldn't really ever do an anthology series unless it was like The Great Twilight Zone, and like Richard Matheson, who was the great writer of The Twilight Zone, who, by the way, was a big influence on Spielberg, and I believe wrote the story that Duel was based on. And makes sense that Abrams would be interested in something like that, as he's such a Spielberg devotee. 10 Cloverfield Lane is all of the great things about that style, the personality, what little you know of some of these characters. Like in Duel, you don't know that much about that guy, but you're so invested in it and you feel like you know him, and that gets you into the mystery. It's a deep mystery in a way. It's a mystery that you can sit on the edge of your couch and forget what time it is, just be fully invested. And I think that's the thing about 10 Cloverfield Lane. I was really, really into it. I had a really great time. I was like, I can't believe I liked the spiritual sequel to Cloverfield this much. Maybe we shouldn't think of it that way. The whole marketing thing is a little silly, but it got me excited for a really nice, neat little thriller, and I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. This might be the mystery box and all these ridiculous advertising done right, because it got you interested in something that I think normally we would probably disregard and see on Netflix and maybe watch. This doesn't have big stars or anything like that, and it needed an extra push. But the other thing about it is that extra push helps the movie because it is kind of a mysterious story. It adds to the mystery of it. If I had just seen this, there'd be certainly some mystery involved in 10 Cloverfield Lane. But the whole idea of, well, what is exactly going on? The added mystery of, how does this relate to Cloverfield? Is she like Lizzie Kaplan's sister? Is that who Lizzie Kaplan was supposed to meet up with? Is someone related to TJ Miller somehow? I don't know. You're just like making crap up in your mind, you know? This film already has a lot of mystery around it that makes it so much fun, and that's what made The Twilight Zone fun. You always tried to guess what was going to happen, and then, you know, you'd have a great ending and go, oh wow, that was really cool. It's one of the few times I actually think the mystery box was actually necessary and kind of worked for itself, and it shows how cool Hollywood can be when all that hype feeds into a great mystery kind of thriller. And that's really the success of 10 Cloverfield Lane. You can sit back and go, well, let's see what this mystery really has to offer, and actually get involved in a mysterious thriller is something I don't think I've seen Hollywood really do in a very long time, and never do this successfully. 10 Cloverfield Lane is probably a small budgeted, neat little thriller that had an awesome ad campaign that actually added to the mystery and made a really fun film going experience. I don't know what it'll be like in 20 years to watch this movie, and maybe it won't be as fun, but as for right now, I think that all came together to give us a fun, mysterious thriller movie going experience. So if you have seen 10 Cloverfield Lane and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.